Gold is sitting near $4,400 an ounce right now, close to its highest level in 10 weeks. Silver is outperforming it with a stronger recent run of its own. And both metals are heading directly into one of the single most closely watched events on the entire financial calendar. A speech that has, in past years, moved markets more in 8 minutes than an entire month of ordinary trading. I want to walk you through exactly why this particular week deserves your full attention. What history says tends to happen when gold is already sitting near a multi-month high heading into this specific event, and what you should actually be watching for as it unfolds. Here is the twist, and I am giving it to you immediately instead of making you wait. Most major economic events are scheduled, predictable, and mostly priced in well before they happen. This one is different. It is a single, relatively short speech delivered once a year at an economic symposium held in Jackson Hole, Wyoming. And because the setting is deliberately informal and the audience is limited to central bankers, economists, and a small circle of financial journalists, the remarks delivered there have a long history of surprising markets in ways that scheduled data releases rarely do. In 2022, a version of this exact speech ran barely 8 minutes, delivered in unusually blunt, stripped-down language, and it sent stocks tumbling and yields spiking within minutes, specifically because the brevity and bluntness itself signaled a level of resolve that longer, more hedged remarks typically soften. The lesson from that single afternoon has stuck with market participants ever since, that this particular yearly speech carries a real demonstrated history of moving markets sharply in either direction, specifically because it is one of the few moments each year when a central bank leader speaks with less of the careful hedging that fills a typical scheduled policy statement. Before I go further, I want to know who is with me right now. Tell me in the comments where in the world you are watching from, and tell me honestly whether you had this event on your radar before this video, or whether today is the first time you are hearing how much weight it has historically carried. I read these, and I promise you the pattern in the comments under a video like this always reveals how differently prepared people are heading into a week like this one. Let me lay out exactly where things stand right now, because the setup heading into this particular week matters as much as the event itself. Gold is trading close to $4,400 an ounce, near a 10-week high, and has now posted back-to-back weekly gains. Silver is trading near $65, outperforming gold's own gains in percentage terms over the past several sessions. The market is currently pricing roughly a 1 inches 3 chance of a rate hike in September, down meaningfully from where those odds sat just a couple of weeks ago, as recent inflation data came in largely in line with expectations and reduced some of the urgency around tighter policy. Underneath all of that, China's central bank added another 20 tons to its gold reserves in July, extending an official buying streak that has now run 21 consecutive months without a single interruption. And sitting alongside all of it, diplomatic efforts to reopen the Strait of Hormuz remain deadlocked, keeping a real floor of geopolitical risk underneath the market heading into a week that already carries plenty of its own uncertainty. If you are finding this useful already, take a moment to like this video and subscribe, because the next part explains exactly why gold sitting near a multi-month high heading into this specific event creates a setup worth watching more closely than an ordinary week. And it is a pattern worth understanding regardless of which way this particular speech ultimately leans. Here is why the setup matters. When gold is already sitting near a recent high heading into a high volatility event like this one, the potential move in either direction tends to be larger than usual, because a market that has already built up meaningful momentum in one direction has more room to react sharply if the coming remarks confirm that momentum, and just as much room to reverse sharply if they contradict it. A speech that leans toward acknowledging more persistent inflation risk, echoing the kind of hawkish tone the market has associated with this event in past years, could pressure gold and silver by reinforcing the case for higher rates for longer. A speech that leans more toward acknowledging labor market softness and validates a more patient path forward could send both metals higher, still adding fresh momentum on top of what is already a 2-week winning streak. Markets are currently priced closer to the patient outcome, given how far rate hike odds have already fallen, which means a surprisingly hawkish tone would represent a larger deviation from what is currently expected, and larger deviations from what markets expect tend to produce the sharpest moves. Let me make this real with two people, because none of this matters until you see how it lands in an actual life. Neither is real, but both are the kind of person you might recognize. The first I will call Reginald, 71, who has gold sitting in his account and has generally ignored the specific calendar of Fed-related events throughout the year, assuming that as long as he checks the price every so often, he has a reasonable sense of what is happening. He has genuinely never heard of this particular yearly symposium and would have no idea, watching a sudden sharp move in his own account later this week, why it happened or what it actually meant. The second person I will call Beatrix, 68, and she has learned to mark specific high volatility events on her own calendar each year. This one among them, not because she trades around them actively, but because she wants to understand why a sudden sharp move in her own holdings happened rather than being caught completely off guard by it. When a move like this arrives later in the week, she will already understand the context behind it, whichever direction it breaks, rather than reacting to an unexplained number with no framework for what actually caused it. The difference between them was never how much gold either one owned. It was that one of them had no idea a specific historically volatile event was even on the calendar, and one of them had already prepared to understand whatever happens regardless of which direction it breaks. Now, why do so many careful people end up like Reginald, unaware of a specific recurring event that has genuinely moved markets sharply in past years? There is a simple reason. Most financial news coverage treats scheduled data releases, jobs reports, inflation reports, official rate decisions, as the primary calendar worth tracking, because they arrive on a predictable schedule and produce a clean, quotable number. A single yearly speech delivered informally at an economic conference does not fit that same predictable mold, so it receives far less sustained attention in the weeks leading up to it, even though its actual track record for moving markets sharply rivals or exceeds many of the more heavily covered scheduled events. It is worth understanding why this particular gathering carries the weight it does in the first place. It began decades ago as a relatively modest annual retreat for central bankers and academic economists, deliberately structured around informal discussion rather than scripted policy announcements. Over time, precisely because of that informal setting, it became a place where central bank leaders have occasionally chosen to signal a genuine shift in thinking before that shift shows up in any official policy statement, using the relative freedom of an unscripted conference speech to test language and signal direction in a way a formal committee statement never allows. That history is exactly why markets treat this specific event with more weight than its short length would otherwise suggest, and exactly why a market already sitting near a multi-month high has more room to react sharply if this year's remarks confirm or contradict the path currently priced in. Now let me be careful and honest with you, because I will not insult you with fear, and this exact subject draws people who want to frighten or excite you into a rushed decision. Not every year's version of this speech produces a dramatic market reaction. Some years, it lands as a relatively uneventful reaffirmation of an already expected path, and markets barely move at all. Gold sitting near a 10-week high does not guarantee a large move in either direction this week. And it is entirely possible this particular year passes with relatively modest market reaction. Anyone telling you they know with certainty how this specific speech leans or exactly how markets will react to it is offering you a confidence that even the most experienced market participants do not actually have heading into an event with this much genuine uncertainty built into it. What I am giving you is not a prediction of which way this breaks. It is the context to understand why gold and silver could move more sharply than usual this week. so that whichever direction it goes, you are not caught the way Reginald would be, wondering what just happened with no framework to make sense of it. I want to say a word about silver here too, because its recent outperformance relative to gold is worth watching closely through this specific event. Silver's added sensitivity to shifting rate expectations, layered on top of its own structural supply deficit, tends to make it move with more force than gold in whichever direction a surprise breaks, which is exactly why tracking both metals together through a high volatility week like this one tells you more than watching either one inch as isolation. So let us pull this together and go back to where we started. Gold sits near a 10-week high. Silver is outperforming it with a strong recent run of its own. Rate hike odds for September have fallen to roughly 1 inches 3. China's central bank just extended its gold buying streak to 21 consecutive months, and the Hormuz standoff remains unresolved, all heading directly into one of the most historically volatile single events on the entire financial calendar. That combination, meaningful recent momentum meeting a genuinely unpredictable catalyst, is exactly the kind of setup worth paying closer attention to than an ordinary week, regardless of which direction it ultimately breaks. And the difference between the people who understand what is coming and the people who will simply be confused by whatever happens comes down to one thing. Knowing this event was even on the calendar in the first place. Here is what I want you to carry away from this, stated as plainly as I know how. This is not a call to panic or to make any rushed move ahead of a single speech, because balance and patience matter, especially with retirement savings. It is a call to understand the genuine context behind a week that could move your gold and silver holdings more than an ordinary week, so that whatever happens, you are prepared to understand it rather than reacting to a number with no explanation behind it. Whether this week changes anything about your own plan depends entirely on your own circumstances, your own timeline, and your own comfort with the kind of volatility a week like this one can produce. And I am not here to tell you the number. I am here to make sure you are walking into this week with the context most people watching the price alone will not have. Do not let anyone use this week's uncertainty to rush you into a costly decision, because there will be people trying in both directions, telling you either to panic or to chase whatever the initial reaction happens to be. And do not dismiss this event either. Telling yourself a single speech delivered at an economic conference could not possibly matter to your own retirement account, because you just learned exactly how sharply this specific event has moved markets in past years. Those are two different mistakes, and the sensible path sits calmly between them. None of this is financial advice. Every figure I have referenced, the current gold and silver price levels, the September rate hike probability, China's 21-month buying streak, comes directly from today's market reporting, so you can verify every word of it yourself rather than take mine. I opened by telling you that gold sits near a 10-week high, heading into one of the most closely watched events of the entire year. Now, you understand exactly why that combination deserves real attention. A market already carrying real momentum, meeting a single speech with a genuine history of moving markets sharply in ways scheduled data releases rarely do. So let me leave you with the question underneath all of it. When a week like this one arrives, carrying real potential to move your own holdings meaningfully in either direction, would you rather be the person who understands exactly why it happened the moment it does, or the person left checking the price with no idea what just occurred?